I've already disappointed some people by saying I won't be singing to you all today, but I'm probably speaking to the wrong crowd with a question about what does federal government have to do with innovation and entrepreneurship. I think we have some people here that are self-selected to be interested in ways that the government is looking at things. But we also know that that's not the case around the country, and about 6 years ago, I moved from Guatemala to Fargo to work for the federal government, for the Small Business Administration. And oddly enough, some of the first comments people would make to me were, so what can you do to help? What's the value you bring to the table? And a whole barrage of questions that really got me kind of defensive. I had to explain, what could I do to help a small business either get started or grow? And after a while, it became easy to explain small business development centers, counseling, ways that traditional small business could access capital. But there was still a subset of individuals that would look to me and say, you know, but Brittany, the government's not on the cutting edge in the entrepreneurship space. They're not involved. That's what the VCs are going after. That's where some of the corporations are involved and have testing centers. But you know, don't tell me that the federal government would ever be part of a business like solar roadways, probably pavement that not many of us have seen before, harnessing energy, or a business like Andy, where you're selling technology. You can test DNA out of the lab in under 2 hours. Blue River Technology, you're using AI, cameras, detecting the tiniest of plants that you want to detect or not have in the ground anymore. You have Pathfinder Technologies. There's some items that are really hard to have user manuals for. And so how do you solve that problem to have weapon systems being tested and people ready to use them? A company like Natal, you're able to have a lower cost, lower excavation, and higher power than a traditional, if anyone knows, Kaplan head in the turbine world. Or a company like Teachly. Very different, but you're using cognitive psychology to be able to get past some of the challenges that students might have, speaking of technology, in a classroom. So the one thing that all those companies leading into this, what they have in common is America's Seed Fund. Do I have folks in the room that already know about SBIR? A small subset? Well, you will all walk away hopefully very familiar with these wonderful acronyms. The Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Program. This is, as in the intro stated, 11 agencies that form a part of the program based off of the amount of research and development that they're having done outside their agency. So they have the budgets for R&D that are to a level where a small percentage has to go to small business. And this isn't arbitrary. This wasn't just a pie in the sky. This was based on a recognition that small businesses, innovators, the creatives, those makers, can address some of the problems that these agencies face in a way that could potentially be more agile than the labs, than the agencies were already using. And not to take the place, but to really target down certain areas, certain technologies where the government wanted to see that innovation pushed. So you saw the little small parts of that pie chart. It does add up into a significant amount of funding. So we have just under $3 billion a year, and that is going out in a large number of awards. And we're talking about grants, we're talking about contracts. It can be a difficult situation for an entrepreneur not used to that world. It's competitive, and they're going up against all kinds of people around the country. They're proposing their technology in a range of topic areas. So I threw some up here to give you an idea of how expansive this is. The topics relate to those agencies' missions, and so some of the agencies that are doing the lovely contracts that were mentioned earlier, they want to be able to hopefully purchase those in the future. And there's a way through SBIR where after some of the proof of concept, the development of the prototypes are done, there's a way for the government to be able to acquire that technology actually in a more efficient and easier manner, both for the government and for that small business. And so you'll see some agencies you might think of, okay, so we have the Department of Energy, Health and Human Services, we might have DOD, NASA, but you won't see from the slide that those agencies also have multiple needs. So within DOD, they also have energy needs, construction needs, and some of the agencies that are part of the program don't buy anything, but they do want to see some movement made in the country and in a certain area, and so you'll have other agencies that put forth topics and they say, who are the startups, the innovators, those big thinkers out there that can address this? We have funding to go behind it, and our whole goal is for you to commercialize. And the term is basically getting it out to market. So it's wonderful, or I think it's fascinating when new things happen in a lab, and we're kind of going on that cutting edge of the next generation of something. But what's even crazier to me is how those can be then taken to address a need out for all of us. And so our office at SBA, we do not have a large R&D budget, but we do work with small business, and so our role in this process is kind of a myriad of things, but one is on an oversight. We're working with the agencies, coordinating, looking at the policy, reporting, data, making sure that companies like Maine Medicinals are listed on SBIR.gov. We're also coordinating outreach amongst those agencies, so trying to be efficient in the way that we're reaching out to that potential pipeline of SBIR, STTR applicants around the country. So who knows about the opportunity? How do they know? What are they surrounded by? What kind of resources do they have access to be able to be competitive for that funding? And then what we're looking for is that impact, and that just doesn't happen. We're not operating in a vacuum, and so we do need to take into account all the other factors at play. What are communities looking at? What are the challenges or the possibilities that entrepreneurs have in front of them? And how do we play a role with what we have at our agency, our mission, the programs, the funding? How do we put all those pieces together? So the two areas I want to get into and share some stories with you today are on the innovation entrepreneur ecosystem. And I have to chuckle at myself a little bit with those words, because it can be the kind of situation where you understand all the words, but what does that really mean? And really we're breaking down into what are the different kinds of organizations, entities, and you'll see, if you can see from the back, from federal, state, local, university, academia. We're talking about accelerators, incubators, business support systems. These are all kinds of entities that could touch an entrepreneur in the early stages. They're looking at taking their technology. There could be a researcher. There could be someone who had been in DOD, out in the field, and they could have seen a problem and they have a solution, but they don't have any funding. What they're working on is too high risk, it's pre-VC, and it wouldn't be made were it not for a connection with SBIR. And so if we want to see Cambrian Technology is able to take a technology from NASA, cleaning water on the space station and then selling to the brewing industry, see the fact that they worked through university system to be able to transfer that. NIA systems, where we have robotic commands and robots understanding tactical commands in very tricky situations. What were the organizations around them as they got started? Our Hysatron, nanoparticle identification. This would not have started were it not for the support that they received to get their team together to be able to produce the technology. So two main areas that our group gets the pleasure of focusing on. One is in the funding realm, and so I'll start with a program called FAST, Federal and State Technology Partnership Program. So this is a small amount of funding. To some of you, you might think it's awful small, about $3 million a year that comes down through us to go to organizations to say, hey, we can do training, we can do outreach, we can help companies that might be applicable to the program. And as with other different kinds of small programs and agency, there can be the tendency to say, all right, we're going to get the awards out, and this is the bar that we've set. But we also can take in information, and there are opportunities to change and to make improvements. So when I started on the team a couple years ago, I took the opportunity to talk to people who had been involved in FAST. What were their challenges? What went well? How did they interact? How did they see SBA as a partner? Was able to do a process, a more customer-centered design as we reimagined our funding opportunity announcement. Because my goal is to make sure that the legislation that puts forth the FAST program, that our goals happen. And our goals happen if our partners know what those goals are clearly. And so if I can lay out that instruction, I'm not making policy change, but I'm using plain language, I'm using all the tools I have at my disposal so that we get the results that we want. Ultimately, we get to celebrate achievements, and we have these amazing entrepreneurs getting their funding. So we have UBQD out of New Mexico. We have a great partner there working with a lab to be able to do energy storage from windows in the hurricane theme. Some of our other FAST partners in Louisiana and Mississippi helped the Whirlwinds Technology Group. Last year, Hurricane Irma hit Puerto Rico, and the Whirlwinds Technology was able to get a commercial jet off the island in Category 5 winds, taking all of its passengers to safety. Also on the funding, we have an accelerator program, and this is one that I like to highlight because it's really allowed SBA to be able to connect with entities that weren't in the normal sphere. In fact, many of the groups I've spoken with through the accelerator program used to avoid the federal government as much as they could. You get in the way, all the conditions on your funding, you're not clear, we can do this better and faster. And so the way that we had a prize competition and accelerators were able to get funding, and many of those in an SBIR vein, opened up new doors, not only for those individual businesses, but also for some of the agency and our partners within the agency as well. The next I wanted to hit on was hitting the road. And so another way that we're getting information, not just from DC, but we're getting out, and we're taking others with us. So mentioning again those agencies that cross the program, there's some that are crazy enough to be convinced to get in a bus and travel around, attend events from local hosts, and be able to share about the program in a way where people can access, understand, and be able to know how they could fit in, what the possibilities are. And so we've really done a great job, I think, over the last 2 years in 33 cities, working with those hosts to bring together all the players in the area that could impact that company and help them, whether it's through their accounting system, it's through writing their proposal, or it could be how they can get therapy after going through an audit. But we're working with the program managers as well so that they know who they're talking with and that they can adjust their language and their approach in a more customer-centric way as well. Beyond just the road tour, we're also going to events, whether it's to talk at events where there are a large number of interesting innovators, like at South by Southwest, CES, but we're also targeting other organizations to help us spread the word and be able to provide that support network. So everything from talking to research parks to folks that are working in the academic, the study realm. We're working with the small business development centers, procurement technical assistance centers, and all that leads us to a lot of opportunities to be able to adjust, to be able to put other programs in someone's mind. And our whole goal is, again, in the name of getting those companies started and getting them growing and helping the government access that technology while also being able to impact us. Now, the last thing I'll mention here is as we're looking at community, as we're looking at government, it can be difficult to get that kind of information. In fact, I often hear people say, well, we'll do a whole slate of roundtables, we'll have a focus group. And the hard part is sometimes on the government side, we'll look to what our own goal is, or we have this program, we have to get it out, and here's the way it has to be. And I think we have a hard time being able to reconcile that with the information that might be around us. And so the way we're able to take in perspectives, understand how communities are different, rural areas, urban areas, coast to coast, they're looking long term, they're really looking to take all of the possibilities into account. What I'm working on might not be urgent for them. And so it is a really a kind of a bridge to be able to have someone who can translate, to be able to have people, and I'm lucky to work with a great team, people who are willing to connect government and the community. And so I'll leave you just with a last few thoughts as some of the companies here on the screen. If anyone brushed their teeth this morning with a Sonicare or used a phone or the internet, all of these companies started small, and they were able to get their start with their technologies through SBIR funding. And it's a great thing to celebrate these big companies and the impact that they're making in an economic sense and the sense of in our homes. But we also are looking at, okay, those are great wins, but what are we doing now? What can we continue to do to improve? How can we put government in the ecosystem, not controlling all the players, but working well together to be able to have new, bold, exciting companies get started. So I hope I can count on all of you to join us in some form in this goal, and I look forward to hopefully connecting again. So thank you.